Welcome, everyone, to another NFL Korner. I'm Nick Stano, and I'm joined by only one of my co-hosts, Anthony Benelli, today, as Tierman is out sick, and we didn't want him to get everyone else sick, so he took the show off today. Like always, we have a lot to talk about, but we're going to start off with some NFL news. To start off, we have Seahawks running back Marshawn Lynch, who trademarked his phrase, "I'm just here so I won't get fined," or at least applied for it. So that was what everyone was talking about today, apparently. Ravens running back Justin Forsett is drawing heavy interest, reportedly, from the Falcons. So if the Ravens don't re-sign him, he could be headed to Atlanta. Vikings running back Adrian Peterson's dad said that his son won't rule out a return to Minnesota. However, there are conflicting reports that say Peterson's agent reportedly told off a Vikings vice president at the Combine that Peterson will never play for the Minnesota Vikings again. There are also conflicting reports on whether Panthers running back DeAngelo Williams was actually released from the team. Williams said that he was released by the Panthers last week in a meeting with head coach Ron Rivera and GM Dave Gettleman. However, as of Monday, the Panthers had not officially released Williams or cleared him for transaction. The Cardinals have given head coach Bruce Arians an extension that will last through the 2018 season. The Giants will reportedly use their franchise tag on defensive end Jason Pierre-Paul if the two sides cannot agree on a long-term deal by March 2nd. This is according to ESPN's Adam Schefter. Colts defensive tackle Ricky Jean-Francois has been released by the Colts only 2 years after signing a 4-year, $22 million extension. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, expects an active market for him, according to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport. Seahawks free safety Earl Thomas will have shoulder surgery today and is expected to be out of action for 6 to 8 months. And finally, Saints Pro Bowl offensive guard Jahari Evans might be released by the team if they cannot restructure Evans' contract, as the Saints are projected as of now to be about $20 million over the cap limit for next season, and Evans' cap hit is $11 million for next season. So just any thoughts on...
That'd be big if the Saints can't get Evans back. I mean,
he is their offensive line, essentially, right now.
Well, Armstead's pretty good, too.
Right, but I mean,
yeah,
they were talking about releasing Ben Grubbs as well on guard,
yeah.
So... I mean, they could be losing potentially two offensive
they might
line
have to
starters.
redo that entire offensive line, which
that'll be big, especially since Breeze isn't getting any older either.
Right.
I mean, a lot of people talk about Peyton and Brady getting old, but Breeze is almost just as old as those guys.
Up there, yep.
All right, so we're gonna move right into one of our big topics, which was the NFL Combine, which took place all of last weekend. So the NFL Combine had a lot of ups and downs for a lot of players, so we're just going to talk about whose draft stock was raised because of the Combine and whose was hurt because of it. Just kind of jumping right into it. These are just some guys that NFL.com listed as players who really helped their draft stock, and we can really talk about them this way. Defensive end Vic Beasley out of Clemson. He bulked up to 246 and ran a 53 40-yard dash, had a 41-inch vertical jump and a broad jump of 10 feet 10 inches, and he just showed precision in the drills portion of the Combine as well. Do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, he outran some of the running backs at the Combine.
And we'll see that later on. But yeah
that's going to be a monster
crazy
on a line. I mean,
he just showed just straight up athleticism in this entire
and he could go
Combine.
anywhere, as we always talk about. D-line is so important.
Right, and then we have offensive tackle La'el Collins out of LSU. He had a 10-yard split of 1.81 seconds for his 40-yard dash, which is the fastest of the offensive linemen, and he looked very impressive in position drills. And now many people have him going in the first round, even though it's late first round.
Right.
But, I mean, who couldn't use an offensive tackle?
Always.
I mean, that's just ridiculous. But then something even more ridiculous is 1 month being removed from shoulder surgery, cornerback Byron Jones from UConn broke the Combine record and almost a world record for the longest broad jump at 12 feet 3 inches. That is almost double his height. I think that's more than double his height, actually. I think he's
5'11", I think.
Yeah. So that's more than double his height he broke in jumping. He also had a vertical jump of 44.5 inches, and scouts said that he looked good in his 30-yard and 60-yard shuttle runs, and he didn't perform in the 40. But still, I mean, this is a guy that came out of nowhere. Like UConn's like a small D1 school. Like they play like Louisville and stuff like that.
And they can't compete when
Right, and
they're
all of a sudden
not
this
a
guy
good school
comes,
at all.
Right, and
but
this guy comes out of nowhere.
There are some names that UConn has pumped out over the years, which is it's impressive for a small school.
He might
like
be
that.
one of them.
Yeah.
And we have cornerback Trey Waynes out of Michigan State, who many believe solidified his top spot among cornerback prospects, running a 40 in 4.31 seconds. One of the people to get the $100,000 from Adidas for running one of the fastest 40-yard dashes in the combine. But a lot of people were saying that he could even go top 15 and top 10 because of his combine. I mean,
top 15 definitely.
Right.
Top 10, I'm just trying to think.
Like, who would really need a defensive back?
The Titans can take a defensive back, but I don't know if he's going to go 2.
No, I think that they'll go D-line 2.
Yeah, they should go D-line.
Like Leonard Williams or something like that. But I definitely think he goes first round. Especially
without a doubt. Without a doubt, he's going to go first round.
I mean, again, this is kind of like one of those things where, like, every team could need, more at defensive back especially. Going on to the opposite side of the ball, probably one of the best combines of the day was Kevin White, who had a lot of questions about his speed going into the draft. He blew everyone away, and this is my opinion. I would take him over Amari Cooper any day of the week and twice on Sunday.
I've been saying that on this show before the combine. I'm going to stick with that, obviously.
But Tierman's probably hurt because we're not taking the Alabama guy. But Kevin White just blew everyone away. He ran a 40 in 4.35 seconds. Also getting $100,000 from Adidas, and he caught every ball that was thrown at him.
Those passing drills where you cut over the middle,
then
you'd be looking both ways,
and he's
jet upfield.
He snagged
the long one.
all of them.
Guy's hands are impressive.
Yeah, I mean, now no doubt he's a first rounder, but now I'd say he goes before Cooper, and he gets drafted at 4 by the Raiders, because they were projected at taking Cooper at 4 anyway. I mean, I don't think that. They need depth at wide receiver. I mean, it don't really make sense.
I was just thinking if he could possibly go sooner than 4.
Would the Jags or Tennessee take him?
Yeah, the Jags probably less likely.
Right.
They drafted 3 receivers in last year's draft. Right. Marquise Lee, Allen Robinson, and Allen Hurns.
Right.
But if
who aren't bad.
Right, and if Tennessee, but then again, in Jacksonville, you're like, oh, we have a promising quarterback in Bortles. Let's add someone that is going to help. Big target. But I wouldn't be surprised. I can't see him going that high, but I'm just trying to figure it out. I mean, if he did go to Tennessee, they don't really have any receivers.
Right.
But Nate Washington and Justin Hunter's promising. But
right. I mean, it's just kind of the fact that they've been very much looking defensive side of the ball first. So I mean.
Yeah.
It would be a surprise if they picked, White second overall.
Right.
But you could definitely see them making a case.
It wouldn't be too much of a surprise,
right?
Especially after the way he played in the combine.
Right, and who knows? His pro days might give us something else. Now, these are just going to be some guys who are hurt their draft stock rather in the combine. Right off the start, we have running back Amir Abdullah out of Nebraska, and kind of a deep field for running backs. He didn't stand out at all. I mean. Vic Beasley outran him in the 40 because Abdullah ran a 4.6, and he didn't really separate himself from the field. I mean, even though he had a lot of good games this past year for Nebraska, but I think he kind of dropped out of contention for a first round, and maybe now he's even like mid-second round pick. I mean,
I could see that definitely.
His pro days might show something else, but. I'd say at the earliest he's now going like low second round, but definitely still going to get picked in the first 4 rounds, I think.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Just with his performance and everything. And then we have wide receiver Sammy Coates from Auburn, who looked super spotty in his drills and had a fair amount of drops as well. That was already a big concern for him going into the combine. A lot of people were talking about that. I mean, he had good. Like a good 40 and vert and jumps and everything, but I mean he didn't have the hands, which is a big problem.
And he's not like any of the receivers in the NFL that are younger that have the size that drop passes.
Right.
And you could say, like, oh, well, we can work on it because they're so big. They're still a target.
Right.
Like Kelvin Benjamin had some issues dropping passes.
Right.
But I think he's only 6 feet. I mean, at that,
I mean, that's
you're going to have to kind of be thrown around on the offense, slot or outside. But if you're dropping passes, then you're definitely going to hurt your stock.
Right. I definitely think that even if he was to even go projected beforehand to go, maybe the first 3 rounds, he's definitely pushing going towards like 4 and 5 at some point because you have to work with size and hands and
after last year with how many receivers were in that draft, there's not any team. Well, I mean there are, but there's not like any specific team that needs receiver after receiver after receiver. Oakland is a team that definitely needs to build receivers, but no team strongly needs receivers that they're going to be taking like 6 receivers in the draft with all their picks.
Right.
So, I mean, he really could drop pretty far down.
Right.
We'll have to see.
Then we have another wide receiver, Devin Funchess from Michigan. While he has good size, he hurt his stock by running a 4.7, which many teams look for a sub 4.5 from a receiver. Even though he's got good size and everything, they also do worry about him running routes because he was a tight end beforehand, so he did a lot more blocking than he did route running. Then you have linebacker Shaq Thompson out of Washington. He didn't impress anyone with his workouts, and many teams struggle about where they would place him because he played linebacker, safety, and running back while at Washington, but he didn't prove himself to be a pro or even a really solid prospect at any one of those positions. So that kind of hurt him as well. And we can also talk a lot about Winston and Mariota because there was just a lot of talk about them anyway. Who do you think had the better combine, in your opinion?
Well, I mean, we'll look at many different aspects of the combine. I mean, we'll start off with the 40. Granted, you would expect that Winston, that was right around where I expected him to run. I mean, he's one of those guys that, like, he's quicker in the pocket. It makes you feel like he can get off and scramble, which, I mean, he can, but he's not Mariota speed. Mariota, fairly quick, with a good 40 time consistently, even in the practice runs. So you look at that and you say to yourself, okay, well, now Mariota has that extra dynamic to himself. He can run around if he gets in trouble back there. But, I mean, if you saw some of the throws that Mariota was throwing, I mean, sometimes it'd be underthrown, sometimes it'd be overthrown. I'm not saying I think he had a great combine.
Right.
But if you look at Winston, the balls were
firing
perfect.
Down the field.
The balls that he threw were absolutely phenomenal. Every single turn by the receiver on a route, the ball was there.
Right there, yeah.
I think I could say maybe and I watched a lot of combine. Right. And I only saw a few bad throws out of him. I mean, and they weren't even bad. They were still catchable balls.
Right.
So with that being said, other than the fact that the only lack for Winston would be if you're the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and you say, well, look, we either have to build our offensive line and draft Winston because he's going to be really good.
Right.
Or you say, well, our offensive line is average at best. If we have Mariota back there, we don't have to worry. He can kind of run around.
Right.
With that being said, I still think they got to take Winston. I was skeptical at first. I kind of figured it was up in the air for either. Mm-hmm. They could probably grab it, but now I kind of think that he's solidified number one.
Yeah, and I definitely think that any team's only concern with him now would be his off the field issues, kind of keeping him in check.
Yeah, and that's always going to be.
That's always going to be a problem. I mean, it's just something
not necessarily a problem, but it's always going to be looked upon.
Right, it's always going to be an issue that people are going to talk about, and it's going to be interesting because Mariota is definitely still going to go top 10.
Oh,
that's not even a discussion. It's just about where he's going to go now. A lot of people have him going to the Jets, but you look at some of these other teams, and they could possibly try and get him. Like, I still don't think it's unreasonable for the Rams to try and trade up and grab him,
especially with what we're hearing about the Rams might be getting rid of Bradford. So.
Right, like we were just checking Twitter before this, and there was a report that, the Bills might be looking at trying to trade for Sam Bradford. Now, whether that move is ridiculous or not is another topic.
What it tells you is if Buffalo's looking to get Bradford, then that means that the Rams either are going in the direction to pursue a quarterback,
or they're relying on Austin Davis
or Sean Hill.
Right.
I mean, that's not really.
That's not depth at
option.
That's not depth at the quarterback position. But yeah, I mean, they might just want to unload Bradford's cap, which is ridiculous. Because like Sue, his was one of the biggest rookie contracts that lasted. I think it was 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
So that's got to be a spot of concern for the Rams, especially if they're looking to become contenders, because their defense looked filthy last year.
They really did, and that was the only issue.
I think their only issue was their offense.
With the issue of the offense, yeah.
Right. And I think like Trey Mason was one of their only bright spots out of the backfield.
Yeah.
So
I mean, there was another player we didn't talk about in the players that did good in the combine.
Yeah, please bring it up.
Anthony Boone from Duke, the quarterback, he hurt his stock, I think. I actually watched one Duke game all year, Duke football.
Yep.
And it was against Arizona State in the bowl game. And he looked to be all right. Kind of a slow guy. Weirdly, he reminded me of like a David Garrard.
Okay.
Big guy, slow, but he's got a pretty strong arm.
Right.
And I watched him in the combine, and I feel like he hurt himself. He wasn't very accurate with his throws. He ran a slow 40. Not really athletic. Kind of looks sluggish.
Right.
So I would throw him under the hurt.
But I think someone who helped their stock, maybe not helped it a lot, but didn't really hurt it, was Brett Hundley.
Hundley definitely didn't help it, but you're right, he didn't hurt it.
But he didn't
average. Very average.
I mean, it was just he didn't do well enough to say that maybe he could go first round, but he's definitely solidified as like a third. He's definitely most likely going to be the third quarterback drafted.
Right.
I believe. I mean, you have Garrett Grayson, but yeah. I mean,
well, that's what I was getting to. I was talking about quarterbacks and someone that helped their stock. He went to South Alabama, so you're not going to get talked about. But Brandon Bridge, based off of his size, he's 6'5", he's 210, so he's got to bulk up.
He's got the build.
He's got the build. Got to bulk up a little bit.
Yeah.
Very strong arm. They said his accuracy is what they fear, but very strong arm. And he ran a very quick 40. He was right behind Mariota. Literally right behind him. I think it was 0.2 off from Mariota. So, I mean, he's pretty quick.
He's got the legs, too, yeah.
Right. So, I think a team will take a shot on him. I don't think he's going to start or anything, but I'm just saying.
I think he goes maybe like 5.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not completely unreasonable for him to go round 5.
See, the thing is in the NFL.
For a team to take a chance on him.
Right. And the thing is nowadays in the NFL, I mean, let's look at this year we had so many injuries.
Right.
From week to week, teams are starting to. I mean, in the olden days, it used to be like, look, we get the best of this position, and then whoever the hell's behind them, whatever. Right. Now you can say, especially at quarterback, you want to be able to have someone that can step up and at least. You don't want to be like, okay, as a coach, our starter goes down, crap.
Yeah.
We have to, in the middle of the season, scramble to go sign someone who's average.
Or worse.
We're screwed because we have no one behind us.
Right.
So I think that a lot of teams, this is why I love the NFL draft, is because people are like, oh, it's too long. No. You got to build a team now.
Correct.
And when you have all the pieces, all your starters, offense, defense, special teams, now
you add depth.
Right. You have to add depth. I think that's the number one thing in the NFL besides offensive line and defensive line is you got to have depth at quarterback. If your starter goes down
in general.
Right. Well, if your starter goes down and your backup is terrible, you're in trouble.
Right. Or you're going through a situation kind of like the Texans where they had multiple quarterbacks go down.
Oh my God! Yeah.
And it was just a huge mess. You had Fitzpatrick, then you had Mallet, then you had to go sign Keenum again. It was just they were all over the place. And even a team like the Bills, who Manuel didn't get hurt, but they needed Kyle Orton to step up, and they don't even have that option this year because he retired.
That's true.
So. I think that would be part of the reason why they're pursuing Bradford is because they don't have anyone to back him up. They don't have anyone that they feel comfortable enough. Even if they did bring in McCowan, he was supposedly visiting them, but even then, it's not. They're not comfortable enough because they're not comfortable with the options that they have currently.
Right.
And I still think that, you're always gonna have every team having like a quarterback on the practice squad, which helps, but that's not really the safety that they want. They want a guy that's NFL ready to be able to step on the field in case they do have two hurt quarterbacks.
Right.
So I think that,
I mean, think about how many teams that it's happened to that they would be like, oh, imagine, like, looking back, if when so-and-so went down, we actually had someone that could come in,
Right.
I mean, like, if you look at, I'll use Dallas, for example, last year.
When Romo went down?
When Romo went down and they had Orton. And Orton played in that Sunday night game, which was to get into the playoffs.
Right.
He played excellent.
Right.
It wasn't his fault. They lost, but he played excellent. In a situation like that, how many teams in the NFL would be able to, in a must-win game, say, I trust my backup? I mean,
not many people at all.
I don't trust the backup on Cincinnati. I trust, if I'm looking at New England, I trust Garoppolo. I think Garoppolo's good, but he also hasn't played in an NFL game more than a quarter.
Right.
So, question of how ready is he?
Right, and I think that as like a team like the Patriots, as a fan, I almost feel spoiled because you have someone like Brady that is so
you feel spoiled,
good.
But then if he goes down,
you feel like you could be almost any other team in the league,
right.
and you don't stand out as much because Garoppolo isn't battle tested in a sense. You almost kind of feel like you did when, as a Patriots fan, rather, if you're old enough. When Bledsoe went down, and you did not know Brady was that good. You just knew that they had drafted this kid who was just a backup out of
vice
Michigan.
Versa, when Brady went down in Castle, and they had a great year,
right?
But they didn't make the playoffs,
right? And that was a crazy year anyway. But
here's the only argument, though, that I mean, I don't. It's not an argument I've heard often. I mean, I've heard it. It's an argument that I feel is true. When you have NFL preseason, and it's 4 weeks, okay. And the starters are playing maybe a full quarter.
Right.
Maybe. When you bring in that second string quarterback that stays in the rest of the game, majority of the game,
right.
He's not going up against starters, So
maybe start him.
That's what I was gonna say. Preseason is.
I could definitely understand that. There's definitely an argument there. Because
what would be the argument of doing it reverse? Start the backup in the preseason games to get the feel against the true NFL defense. Then bring in the starter. If it's a starter, he's established.
Right.
He's played against the best, so he doesn't need as much. I mean, you're still going to get the training, but it's the backup that you always have to worry about. I mean, we can't be over. Have over anxiety about it, the situation. Right. But you always want to be confident that whoever's going to come in can at least win games for you. If you get an injury. I mean, like in Philadelphia this year when Foles went down.
Sanchez stepped up.
Well, Sanchez and Kelly are tight, and Kelly had all the faith in the world in Sanchez, and look what happened. I mean, solid year. You can't complain.
Right. I mean, there's definitely an argument. I think it's very team situational dependent because you do want your quarterback, your starting quarterback, if it's not established, if you have a QB battle going on, you do want, them to kind of switch off against the starters.
Right.
However, for a team like Cincy or for the Patriots or Green Bay, you could start your backup because you already know Brady's going to be on fire. You know Dalton's going to have a good year. You know Rodgers is going to be MVP candidate as long as he stays healthy, and even then. I mean, there's definitely a case to be made.
The problem with the NFL is sometimes the NFL looks too much and says, okay, this is our starter, so
we need to throw everything.
It has to be the starter.
Right.
And it happened to Pittsburgh this year in the playoffs when Roethlisberger went down.
Yep.
They brought in Gronkowski. Gronkowski led him, 50 yards down the field about the score, and then all of a sudden, one play, Roethlisberger comes in, Gronkowski just led a great drive, and what's the first thing Roethlisberger does? Throws a pick in the end zone.
Right.
Seals the deal.
Game over, pretty much. Yeah, I mean... I think depth is one of the most underrated things about the NFL draft.
And that's why I'm saying the draft is so important.
Right,
most
because...
people overlook it. Right,
because a lot of people who are like the casual fan or anything will look at ESPN or look at NFL.com if they go that far even, and they'll look at what their regional sports networks are saying and go, all right, well, these are like the guys that are going in the top 10. These are who these people are saying, who my team's getting.
Right.
Let's focus on that, or let's go even higher. Let's make up these absurd predictions rather than looking at it as a giant board game, essentially. You
Right.
try and work your position on the board. You try and work what best fits for your team and what no one else is paying attention to.
Exactly.
You know the top 10 guys are probably going to go in some way or shape or form the top 10 unless something crazy happens.
Right.
It's the other, 200 picks that are going to be really fundamental for your team. Look at, okay, I'm going to use this example again, the Patriots. Brian Stork, 3rd round, starting center for the entire year. And when he went down, everyone was like kind of losing their minds because he had anchored that line that had been crazy almost the entire year. So it's not about the guy you draft in the 1st round. Look at the Browns. They drafted Justin Gilbert and Johnny Manziel.
Well, Gilbert
was all right.
Yeah, and
but,
he's a corner, so I mean,
right. I mean, they'll come into their positions,
around,
but
I don't know about Manziel
everyone wanted their 1st round picks to just fly through it. And granted, you had Sammy Watkins, OBJ, Benjamin, Mike Evans.
Right.
You had all this talent coming out of the 1st round.
Yeah,
but look at what other teams did in the 2nd rounds, in the 3rd rounds, and the 4th rounds. It's where you get your quality picks.
Yeah, and something else is that when you look at the draft as a whole, teams, and this is an opinion, and you can tell me what you think. Teams tend to do this. Okay, it's the 5th round in the draft. All right, and you need a tight end. There's still a huge board of tight ends. And you know that this guy's production was limited that you're looking at. And this guy's production was pretty high. But this guy went to Alabama, or this guy went to Georgia Tech, and this guy went to a D1 AA school. And they were talking about this during the combine. And a cornerback, Trey McBride, they were saying the guy was so fast. His hands were kind of spotty, but he had a hell of a college career.
Right.
Hell of a college career, but he went to William & Mary. So
right.
D1 AA.
Yep.
So where did Stork go? He went somewhere pretty good for college, didn't he? Didn't he go USC or
Florida State?
He went to okay, so
even that alone.
The name speaks in the NFL draft. If you're a team and someone had crazy production and someone had an NFL team will take a backup tight end before they take a starting tight end.
Oh yeah, definitely.
If the starting tight end went D1 AA.
Right.
Backup went, SEC or a powerhouse school.
Right, and I think that it's definitely a good point because the name of a school does speak almost as loud as
So is it considered a risk if you take someone that went D1 AA?
Well,
knowing that they really are hit or miss?
Yes, it is a bit of a risk, but isn't every pick. Really,
essentially, it is.
Right,
yeah.
But we were talking about this last week. Is who are you going to get offensive line wise from a small school? You're really going to go big school for offensive line or defensive line because they're in the spotlight more.
Surprise.
They win. Oh yeah, definitely.
That guy had a D3 at the combine who had the fastest 40 for an offensive lineman. He was D3.
Right. It was, but mainly you're going to rely on your SEC teams or your ACC teams.
Without a doubt.
Because they're the bigger guys, they're the more talked about guys, they're the guys that win the awards like Brian Stork, and they're the guys that have been pretty much playing in some semblance pro football.
But the beautiful thing, and I agree, and the beautiful thing about the draft is this. Blake Sims, for example. What was he in college? Quarterback. He's looking, they're going to work him out at corner. They're going to work him out.
And they were also working at a running back too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Corner, running back.
You also was it like Jordan Lynch out of NIU last
quarterback,
year. Yeah. He was like the only senior Heisman candidate, and then he changed to running back, and then he was on the Bears. I don't even know if he's still there or not.
I don't think he is.
I think he's on practice squad. But then.
But look at that. So here's a guy D1 AA. Really quick, but do you trust him? Because someone who's 6'5" is not going to slip to a D1 AA team to go play receiver.
Right.
So obviously it's the smaller guys, it's the weaker guys, it's the guys with not as good at hands, but it's the guy who runs a 4.28.
Right.
You take him as an athlete.
Right.
Would you not?
Oh yeah, definitely.
And then maybe change his position down the road.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does have some risk, and the school does speak. But you can't overlook the little guys.
Oh yeah,
I don't
definitely.
Think you can ever overlook the little guys.
Yeah, I definitely think that a big example of this right now is Julian Edelman.
Right.
Kent State quarterback,
Right.
Transitions to wide receiver, has a bunch of injuries the first 3 years
Right.
that he's out there. Last year plays his first full season. This year comes out building off of that and does great things for the Patriots.
Chris Matthews.
Right, who came out of nowhere for the Super Bowl.
But the thing is, I mean, it's kind of like an advertisement if you're talking about marketing. Every player that's in the combine, it's in the draft, take a chance on me.
Right.
You never really know unless they do. Tavares Jackson, I mean, he's nothing now. He went to a Division III school.
Right.
The guy who used to play for Minnesota, he's the backup on Seattle. Third string on Seattle now.
Right. There's
also talent there.
Yeah.
There really is.
Yeah, there's talent stacked throughout the draft. It's just a matter of finding what's right for your system.
Right.
Because you could have a guy that is an amazing athlete. If he doesn't fit into your system,
right,
he's not going to produce like you want him to.
Well, the only argument is when you take a risk, it's also financial.
Yeah.
I mean, I read something the other day that Michael Sam is Dancing with the Stars.
Yeah, that just came up on around the NFL. I mean,
stuff like that. I mean, a guy like that, you take a risk on, and then they could end up being nothing, not fit the system or
right. And I think that's where your 5, 6, and 7 picks are really crucial because you're taking picks and using them as a risk because a lot of people won't watch like 4, 5, 6, or 7 of the draft because it's too much for them. You know, it's just extra. They got their guys in the first 3 rounds.
Let me ask you something.
But I think that's where you can find
gems
that you could get a lot of like stale picks and busts, but you might get that one guy who's going to do amazing things for your team because he works out for your system because everyone else overlooked him. I mean, like Sam was the last pick in the draft in the 7th round. And in the preseason, he didn't look bad. It's just everyone else looked better.
And if he would even fit the system.
Right. I mean, there was even questions there. So
how important
he didn't work out in
draft?
St. Louis, but I mean, I think that there's still something to be said for any pick.
So what speaks at the draft? Can you have an average college career? Say you went to a big school. Say you went to Alabama, okay? And you have an average college career.
You mean like Newberry's not a big school?
Yeah. Average college career.
Yep.
Kill it in the combine. Absolutely kill it in the combine. How much does the combine hold in the draft? Kill it in the combine, kill it in the pro day, but you had an average, at best, college career. So,
I think that could speak volumes about growth. And I think that if we're looking at guys like Byron Jones out of UConn, you never heard anything about him until he jumped, over 12 feet in the broad jump and had an amazing vert.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you're still going to see him go middle of the draft at earliest, and still he could end up being a great pick. And you could also start to slowly make a case that you could find undrafted free agents, even if you don't get some guy the 256 picks that there are in the draft. If you get an undrafted free agent, your Malcolm Butlers, your Chris Matthews, like the guys that will start out almost guaranteed on the practice squad, and through injury or playing a guy will work their way onto the roster and come out of nowhere and help your team. I mean, it was years ago the NFL draft had over 7 rounds, and the Patriots got was it Troy Brown in the 8th round of the draft. Ends up being one of their best receivers over the period of a decade.
I think it was 7th was the last round. There's no 8th round.
No, there was.
Oh, yeah.
It was before they cut it down.
You're right. Okay. Yeah, and was it that late that he went, though?
Yeah, he went in the 8th round. He was one of their latest star draft picks, essentially.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, you had a guy who led the franchise in receiving yards quietly for a while because you had like Terry Glenn who went early in the draft for them,
who was pretty solid.
He was solid. He was the number 1 receiver. He was just iffy on and off the field type deal. He had a lot of behavioral issues, if you want to say that.
Yeah.
But you had Troy Brown, very consistent, very good for the Patriots, 8th round of the draft, who in this day and age would have gone as an undrafted free agent.
Right, exactly.
So you have guys that come out of undrafted free agency and work wonders for your team as well. as in the point of Chris Matthews and Malcolm Butler.
Exactly.
So I think there's definitely something to be said for the combine and these guys that did help and hurt their draft stock. I definitely think that has a bit of an impact as to where they go and as to what teams are willing to take a chance on these guys now.
Right.
And we didn't really hear too much about some of the guys that were injured, like Todd Gurley and everything. But you got to think that they didn't hurt their stock too much because everyone kind of waned on them.
Exactly.
Because of their injury. Like, I mean, a lot of people were talking about Gurley going first round, like top 15, beginning of the college football season, and then he gets hurt.
I don't care. I read an article that said that he did improve his stock.
Really?
Yeah, but that's always in the back of an NFL team's mind whether they say it or not is an injury. That's always.
I mean, you're always going to take a risk on a player. Anyway, especially taking someone who is coming off an ACL injury,
which is the most. I mean, it's the biggest issue to have if you're a running back,
right?
So.
And especially someone who carried the ball that much in college.
Yeah.
I mean, he's definitely one of the better running back prospects in the draft, right. But you got to think he's already in a DeMarco Murray situation where. He's had a lot of wear and tear going already into the NFL draft. So he maybe has. I'll be surprised if he lasts more than 6 seasons.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I mean that's gonna wear and tear him down. All right, so that's the combine. That's like pre-draft and everything. Now we're gonna look at the directions of teams, and I know we started to briefly talk about this last week, where teams are headed, what they should be focused on. So we're gonna try and briefly get to. All 32 teams, and the way I set this up was just looking at like a mock draft and seeing what teams were where. So a lot of this is going to be in the draft order. We're just going to start off right with Tampa Bay at number 1. They have the huge, decision of Winston or Mariota.
Right.
Whether they go one or the other, I mean, the other's going to go in the top 10 as well. But I said that their focus should be on their offense.
Period.
This season in general, just because, you do have Mike Evans, and you do have Darg Martin in the backfield, but you need to solidify the quarterback position, which they're going to do with the number 1 pick. Hopefully, maybe not this year, but next year.
He throws curveballs.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be, and he loves defense.
Yeah.
And he's thrown a lot of curveballs in the drafts before.
A lot of people have been quietly saying that maybe he goes
maybe just
Leonard
go
Williams or
right. So I wouldn't be totally shocked if that happened.
But would you be upset as a Bucs fan? Because as you look at the Bucs, you have
with the weapons they have on defense and offense, I think now like the huge piece to add to get the team clicking on all cylinders would be a quarterback. Obviously, right. You just said it best. I mean, you have the weapons on offense. Give him someone to throw,
Right, and I think that
defensively,
it doesn't hurt that Vincent Jackson's coming back either. You have another 6'5" target to throw to. That's great for especially a rookie quarterback or a quarterback like Glennon. I mean, you have Levante David, you have Gerald McCoy, you have leaders and pieces on defense. Mm-hmm. You're not going to lose any talent. You have Jonathan Banks in the secondary,
Alteron Werner, Banks,
right. I mean. You definitely need to.
They gotta just.
I mean, they lost Mark Barron, but that was
bad.
That was the dumbest thing ever.
Goldson.
Right.
I wish they got rid of Goldson and kept Barron.
Right, you had said that earlier.
Goldson's all done. Major Wright is okay, but I think you gotta redo the whole secondary, all the safety. Excuse me.
Right, but I definitely think that they need to focus on offense. Yeah.
Agree.
Now we have Tennessee, who likely was going to take a defensive player with the second pick, and I think that at some point they could actually start to focus. I mean, if you take say they get Leonard Williams as their second pick, then they might start to look at offense too, because you look at that offense and you can't really say that there's any one player that stands out and makes that offense a threat, a really deep, a really hard threat that will, completely change the game.
Absolutely not.
You play solid against their offense, and they're stopped to a dead halt.
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely think that they need to at least consider having an offensive heavy draft outside of maybe 1 or 2 picks. Because they do have Jason McCourty, they do have a couple pieces at linebacker.
They have, yeah.
I mean, you do have pieces here and there on the defense.
I think they can
it's
focus
just working
on both,
around it, right?
But offensively is key. It's always key on offense when you have a few pieces on defense. The defense can, play solid. If you bring in one, their defensive line is already pretty good. It's the strongest part of that defense.
Right.
You bring in someone else, that's helpful. They need to redo the secondary though.
I mean, Jason McCourty's good. It's just that
no one else.
You don't have anyone else around him. Right.
I mean, Cody Sensabaugh's okay. Brett Wilson's okay at corner. Pollard's up there.
He's getting old too.
Safety. You got to do that.
I think he's.
Young,
I think he's all right for now. It's just you need to more address the corner position.
The corner position, yeah. Linebacker's okay. Defensive line, you add a piece to it, like you said, and they'll be fine. I think you can go offense at that point.
So the next one would be the Jags with the 3rd pick. I mean, what do they really do with it? What do they need more, especially with the talent that would be going top 5? I mean, what on like they could again work both sides of the ball.
Would you be surprised if, knowing all the issues that Blackman has, they can never really count on that guy? I mean, that guy's been in the league now at Oklahoma State for what?
4 years.
Is it 4? Like is it 3 or 4 years?
3 or 4 years.
And how many seasons has he actually played a full season?
None.
The receivers they've brought in are they're pretty good, but no one's a big name target.
Yeah.
They're still building. Cecil Shorts is probably their best receiver, but he's like 5'11".
Right.
Would you be surprised if they took Kevin White or Amari Cooper?
No, and you were just talking about this earlier. Actually, I mean, these guys are definitely going to go first round. It's just a matter of where, and any team can use another wide receiver. But I think that, I mean, they have solid guys that are already in place. I don't know if they would go with another wide receiver. They could. I just think that they might have other areas of concern. Because I know injuries kind of bogged down the defense.
Right.
So, I mean, that could be something that they look at as well, adding depth there. You also have, I think one mock draft had Fowler going there at linebacker.
Really?
Which is really high for him.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say it's, too out there, too absurd for them to look defensive as well.
Yeah, no, I mean,
it's still a young team. You could put more young pieces anywhere on that team, and it would eventually work out. It's just
secondary.
It's just they need time to mature and to grow as a team and as units and as players because it's so young.
Up there in age on that team that's kind of a leader on the defense that I mean, time flies. I haven't even thought about Paul Posluszny.
Yeah,
he's been there for 6 years now.
Yep.
I mean, that's a long time.
Yeah.
Time flies. They definitely can go either way with this pick, I think.
Yeah. All right, then we have the Raiders with the 4th pick overall, who could either draft Cooper or White because they really needed. I mean, the note that I had here was just fix offense, period.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just they have
now they know that Derek Carr can
Right.
play. I mean, he had a hell of a rookie season.
Right, and I think
with no talent.
Right, and I only think that you have a guy like James Jones who's average at best.
Yeah, I don't know.
Who was really made in Green Bay by Aaron Rodgers. But if you start to add, pieces around that, he might start to pick up some semblance of production more.
Right.
And McFadden, garbage. I mean,
well, Latavius Murray kind of stepped up those few games, and
before he
might
hurt.
have a role.
Yeah, I mean, their best bet is to kind of roll with what they got at running back, but they definitely can work with
because they're not going to waste a pick on a running back.
No. Not especially a 4
not that
pick.
early. Yeah. No.
So I think that they could definitely work at wide receiver, maybe in the later rounds grab a tight end. Then you could look, maybe
Rivera's
secondary.
Good. Rivera's good at
Oh,
tight
I'm not
end,
saying he's bad. It's just
a
dual threat at tight end never hurt any team.
That's big in the NFL nowadays. Yeah.
So I just think that the more that they work quality picks into the draft, the more that team can only get better.
It's funny to say this, but I mean, it wouldn't happen in the 4th round, but if we're talking draft in general.
Maybe Kubiak does something with that team.
Janikowski's getting up there in age.
Right.
It's interesting to think about. They might need to take a kicker in this draft. There's a couple of teams that I was looking at. I mean, kickers stay around forever, but you may need to take a kicker in this draft. A lot of teams don't draft kickers. They sign them after the draft's over. But you got teams that are getting really old that maybe at the last pick, if you've taken every single thing that you need and you're in the final round, it wouldn't hurt to go with a kicker.
Yeah, I mean, if you cover all of your positions well enough that you're satisfied with it, why not go with a kicker?
You save money going with a kicker.
Yeah.
You're going to have to sign someone to the league minimum, the rookie minimum, if you actually want to keep them on the roster, which is going to be high. Whereas if you just sign a kicker, you can sign them to like league minimum, which would be pretty low for a kicker. So.
Right. I mean, there's also the thing that you can. I mean, kickers are always going to go late, but you don't necessarily have to draft them either. I mean, that could be an undrafted free agent thing.
Right. That's the thing. That's what I'm saying. A lot of guys just get signed after the draft.
Yeah. I mean, I think like the only kicker that would possibly be drafted next year would be Aguayo out of Florida State.
Right.
Has very a good. Boot. He has
very
a boot.
I was impressed with him, even in the.
Only missed one kick this year.
Yeah, I was impressed with him in the game, the Rose Bowl game. First time I actually got to see him play. He's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, that would be like one of the only guys that you would really see besides Janikowski.
But all
that
I'm
would
saying
be
is
drafted.
a lot of kickers. You like, crap. We're seniors in college. We've been watching football a long time.
Right.
You're saying. These names I've heard since I was 6 years old. These kickers.
Right.
Before you know it, there's going to be a new wave coming in.
Vinatieri. Like Vinatieri. He's been around
forever.
Yeah. He was on the Patriots since like
when we were babies.
They were winning. They before they were winning Super Bowls.
Right.
I mean it was. Yeah, and I remember
household names they're getting older now, so you're gonna assume that they're gonna start bringing in new guys. So I mean.
Right, and like I even still remember when the Patriots let him go and brought in Gostowski. And how much of everyone was mad about that because he had kicked the game-winning field goals for us for a while.
Right.
It'd be like the equivalent of, the Red Sox letting Ortiz go.
Right.
After all the home runs he hit. It was just
fits,
it was just someone that everyone liked. It was kind of like a hometown hero type deal, and everyone liked him. But then you have Gostowski come in and who has automatic boot. Anything inside of 48 yards is golden. Anything inside of 50, you're fine. Next we have the Redskins at number 5. I'll be really interested in what they do with the 5th pick, because you kind of have to work with what are they going to try and fix first. Are they going to try and fix the offense first or the defense? I mean, you have pieces on both sides. You have Arakpo might not come back. But then you have Ryan Kerrigan at linebacker there. You also have RG3 officially announced as being your starter for the entire year, is what Jay Gruden came out with. But you also have Alfred Morris in the backfield. You do have Garcon and Moss as receivers, and they're old, and they're all right.
Sean Jackson.
I mean
Leonard Hankerson, Andre Roberts.
Yeah, Niles Paul.
Average and below guys.
Right. I mean, it's just
still
who do you
weird
work
to you.
on
Speaking
with?
of Washington, that they named RG3 so early. I mean, that's so weird to me.
I mean,
I think it's good in the standpoint that
we were talking about this last week. Yeah.
But what I'm saying is, all right. So look, you named RG3 the starter, right?
Mm-hmm. So now you know exactly what you're going to do system wise.
Maybe you go receiver.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
The receivers are all old that they have.
Yeah.
Other than Hankerson, Roberts, Deshaun's like 28, 29.
Right.
But what if you did
have a couple young tight ends as well.
Would you be surprised if they took Amari or Kevin White if they're available to give RG3 another weapon?
No, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
The defense is one of those defenses that's young enough in the secondary that they're probably going to get better, with time. I don't think they need to draft anyone in the secondary. Maybe if you fill for Hall because Hall's getting old.
Right.
But safeties are fine. Merriweather's old, but
he should be like Pollard. He should be fine for another year or two.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about right now to make the team better, to give it a push. I think, honestly, they might take a receiver with that pick because you got to assume. I mean, what happens if White goes 3 or 4 and Cooper goes 3 or 4? No one would have saw that coming.
Right.
But it's not a bad pick because those are teams that 3, 4, and 5, you
Could
can't
all
go
use
wrong picking a receiver.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that if White and Cooper are gone, they could you could definitely make a case for anywhere. And I think specifically you could look at O-line or D-line. I mean, that wouldn't hurt. They might get what's his face, Shane Ray out of Missouri.
Yeah, I saw that. Hey, look, it's a strong enough draft where you're not gonna take a bad pick that early.
Right.
If you can't get what you initially want, there's still something.
Unless you go like a ridiculously absurd pick in the first 5 picks, I don't think you have bad choices.
Yeah.
I mean, like if Tampa Bay came out and took Byron Jones as the first pick, it's just like, unless it's something that
or
stupid.
a receiver. I mean,
right.
They're probably good.
It's just
NFL,
if you play it smart.
Teams do that. Teams will draft players that they already have, and you're like,
why? Yeah. I mean, it's something that they can think about, but I mean, it's definitely
right
up in the air for them. Fitz isn't here, but I said that they need to draft a quarterback. So if Winston or Mariota don't go first, I think that they draft a quarterback because that's a position that's been made a joke in New York for years now.
A while now.
Yeah, I mean, you had the butt fumble with Mark Sanchez, and then you had, all the controversy around that about him being a baby or whatever it was, and then you have Geno Smith who throws more interceptions than he does touchdowns consistently year after, in the 2 years that he's been starting for them. So then you have Mike Vick, and then you just have all this confusion going on there. So I really think you could help them to get one solid quarterback and maybe dump Geno or dump Vic.
Well, Vic's gone. Vic's already gone.
Okay, so I mean,
he only signed a 1-year deal.
Yeah, so I don't think that they re-sign him. I think that they do get a quarterback, and then that really helps them out because they can solidify that, and then you can kind of work around that. Then you can, you have Chris Ivory still in the backfield. You do have, Decker at wideout. You do have Jason Morrow at tight end. Yeah. I mean, you do have some of the pieces there. I think it really starts for them, like Tampa with a quarterback.
I would be surprised if Mariota, how about this? Because Tennessee has given no indication that they're taking a quarterback.
Right.
If you get to this pick, which is 6, and Mariota or Winston went 1, because you got to assume Tampa Bay's taking a quarterback 1.
Right.
I would be shocked if one of those 2 quarterbacks aren't available for the Jets. I would be shocked.
Yeah.
Because Tennessee has not said anything about them taking a quarterback.
They already have Mettenberger.
Right. Jacksonville's not going to take a quarterback after Bortles.
They just got Bortles number 3 last year.
Oakland's not going to take a quarterback. They
Derek
have Carr.
Yeah.
And Gruden is apparently going with RG3, and
I don't think that they would have taken a quarterback in the first 5 picks anyway.
Absolutely not. No,
they just spent a whole bunch of money on RG3. Why would they do that?
Right. So what I'm saying is that pick's going to fall to the Jets. It's just going to land in their lap.
Yeah.
It's a matter of if they take a quarterback or they don't. It's going to be there.
But the other thing I was just going to say is that they need to fix the offense. And I think
they need another piece. They don't have like a weapon.
They're missing something, and Percy Harvin is not that piece by any stretch of the imagination. He's a waste of money.
I mean, like you said, Fitz isn't here, but he's a big Jets guy. But he was saying the same thing. He agreed with me last week. You got to let Harvin walk. I mean,
he's not worth like in excess of anywhere in the area of like $1 million.
They have TJ Graham, who's small but he's quick and he's good, and they have Curley, who's quick and fast and good, and like you said, Decker and Amaro, who's rookie this past year at Texas Tech, who had a great year. The backfield's okay. Baleel Powell and Chris Ivory. They got rid of Chris Johnson, which I don't think's a bad move.
Yeah, Ivory kind of took the brunt of the load for them anyway.
The Jets are a team that needs to build depth. Yeah. Well, I guess Geno would be an all right backup quarterback.
Yeah.
If you bring in someone.
I mean, he does have the NFL experience. He did start for 2 years.
Think about a team that's just screwed. I mean, you look at the teams that have taken rookies, the backup for the team that took a rookie and started a rookie is a vet.
Right.
They'd be the Jets with an inexperienced, awful stats to show Geno Smith at backup with a rookie that has everything to prove.
Right, and you're not really helping Mariota's or Winston's growth by
bringing
having
them into that
Geno
situation.
Smith. Yeah, I mean,
and
that's
like,
rough.
Yeah,
I can see how that wouldn't work, but they got to take the chance. I think if either one of them fall, they have to take
the
that
Jets,
chance.
and they do take it.
Mm-hmm.
Are they automatically the starter?
Probably, yeah.
Over Geno, you don't think?
Probably,
Geno even gets a chance to start?
I think they'll kind of label it as, we're going
Fighting
quarterback
for a
position. Yeah, it's going to be like a QB battle for number one, but
you would have to assume.
No, I think unless injury or something really bad happens in the preseason, that the rookie would be.
These are two of the most talked about quarterbacks in any draft in a while.
Right.
So
yeah,
we'll have to see.
Next we have the Bears. I just said that they need to get their house in order, and offensively speaking, because Jay Cutler can't butt heads with John Fox like he did with Trestman.
What if Cutler leaves?
I think that they try and maybe trade up and get a quarterback.
If Cutler leaves, if Cutler's gone, you have Clausen and Fales. Now Fales was a rookie this year.
Right.
I guess they were pleased with his production. Said he's not awful.
Clausen is a career backup.
Clausen, that's all that he is.
Right.
But I actually don't think that. When I say this every week when this comes up, I don't think that Jay Cutler's a bad quarterback.
No, he's not. It's just
the talent that they have at receiver it's more of like a locker room issue. They got to click. Well, at the beginning of the year they were in contention. Right. I mean, in the beginning of the year they weren't counted out after the first 6 games. But then there was all the issues off the field.
Yeah, and I definitely think
Brandon Marshall in the locker room, Jay Cutler in the locker room. Yeah. I think that they, more than anything, need to, like you just said it pretty good, need to get their pieces in order and figure things out.
And I do think that Cutler's not a bad quarterback. It's just when he starts to lose his calm, when he loses his cool, when he starts getting, wicked fiery or, starts throwing a tantrum during press conferences is when the team starts to go downhill because, A, your leader's setting a huge example of what not to do. Yeah. And he's not really putting confidence in the team. He's just kind of, being like a toddler and kind of throwing a tantrum when he should be, poised and composed, like a Brady or like a Rodgers.
Team foreshadows the skill because the skill is there.
The skill is there. You see Alshon Jeffrey. You see Brandon Marshall. You have
Matt Forte. Yeah. You have Martellus Bennett.
Like, you have great
that
pieces
offense
there.
Is awesome.
Yeah. You have the offensive pieces. You just need to gel as a team. And I think that would be a team where they start their starter during the preseason because they need it.
Right.
Then we have the Falcons, and I just had defense.
The worst defense.
Because they need it.
Are they in the rebuilding stage as a whole?
I would say so.
After this year?
Yeah. I would say offensively they can kind of deal with what they got, but Roddy White's injured for at least 6 games every year. Julio Jones is their
this year.
Yeah, but he's their only real bright spot. Matt Ryan is kind of working with what he's got. You gotta
assume that
Steven Jackson's old. You have Freeman, you have Rodgers, but none of them will stick as a starter. So if they do get Forsett, though, that team offensively just got a lot better.
Well, offensively they're fine. Defensively they're in trouble.
Right. I mean,
they're in trouble, and they can also go offensive line.
Yeah, they could go offensive line, but I really think that they either go defense of line or secondary.
Especially first, you have to go defense.
Yeah, I think that
Trufant's the only good guy in that secondary. In the whole secondary, Marcus Trufant.
Yeah, and I definitely think that it wouldn't hurt them to get a guy like Trey Waynes. Maybe not in the first round, but at least try and grab someone like that, someone that would add a lot of depth.
And the good thing is about the draft, we didn't talk about. I mean, we talked about like players, but we didn't say this. As a position, this was stated that as a whole, the cornerback position is way deeper than people had expected.
Yeah.
After the combine showed that.
Yeah.
There's some really good corners out there.
Yeah. Then we have the Giants, and I said O-line. Not really sure what they could do with that 9th pick. They could definitely go O-line, but they could definitely work defense as well. Just because they're set on offense. Right. You have O-line, Victor Cruz if you re-sign and restructure his deal. Then you have OBJ. You have Jennings in the backfield. You're not getting rid of Eli anytime soon. So if you give him a better O-line to work with, that would stop a lot of interceptions because not all of them are his fault. Some of them are his offensive line isn't holding up, and he could we see it he could throw for 400 yards every game.
Exactly.
But if he doesn't get protection, he's going to have 400 yards, but also 5 interceptions.
Exactly.
So they can look defense. That couldn't hurt them. I feel like a lot of teams either have one good side of the ball and one really bad side that really needs work, and I think that's what we're seeing with the top 10 right now.
Yep.
Speaking of the 10th pick, we have the Rams. And like I just said, fix offense. If you get a good wide receiver, if by some miracle Cooper or White fall to the 10th pick, you need to get them. That pick should not be on the board for more than a minute after that.
That you're taking those guys, and
I think
not going to happen. But if Mariota or Winston drop that far, and you are trying to unload Bradford, like they said, then you could take a quarterback.
Yeah, definitely.
But they definitely need a receiver because Kenny Britt's old. Yeah. He's good, he's big, but he's old.
Right.
And then you have Stedman Bailey and Tavon Austin, who are more special teams guys.
Right. So I would go more of a position player for them at the 10th pick, but then could you see that
if Mariota's available?
Yeah.
And say White's available, you were saying take White over Mariota in that situation?
I would.
Because
here what I would do, because say they get White at 10, you go into the second round. You got Hundley. You got a couple other guys that are still there.
Guys that you could start at quarterback.
And not even just that. You wouldn't have to risk trading up or doing anything to try and get Mariota right after that.
Right.
You just sit back and let Mariota get drafted and then let Hundley essentially come to you.
And the defense is excellent.
Defense doesn't need to be touched for the most part. I mean, you can work with
what
you got. You can add, but no one's going to start if you draft them because your depth is just there. I mean, your starters are there. It's just depth. Now with the 11th pick, you have the Minnesota Vikings, and it's kind of for them. They have to figure out realistically in the next week if they can get AP back or not, because that's kind of big for them. He was their offense essentially for a while. You had their two biggest offensive weapons were Cordell Patterson and Adrian Peterson. And Adrian Peterson's looking like he probably won't be coming back if what his agent was saying is true, if what sources were saying are true. So then you need to look, because McKinnon is just not your answer. Same with Asiata. Asiata is a fullback more than anything.
Lineback.
So
McKinnon fumbles a lot. He's quick, but he fumbles a lot.
So I definitely think that they need help there, but they can look to later rounds for that.
Right.
Maybe get a guy like Abdullah or something like that later on. But where do they go with the 11th pick, do you think? Because at this point, after 10, it really starts to thin out for what teams might expect to get. You're not going to get White or Cooper. You're not going to get Mariota or Winston. You're not going to get, Williams. He's going to go first round as well.
Right.
Could they go
you mean top 10?
Could you go defense? Could you go secondary at that point?
Harrison Smith's one of the best safeties in the NFL.
Right, but I'm saying, could you even go with, a corner? I mean, that's a
They have
risk.
Xavier Rhodes, who's one of the best. They have Captain Munnerlyn.
Munnerlyn, too. Munnerlyn's 5'8", and he's good at slot.
They have another rookie that was this year, Josh Robinson. He's good.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't think there's a bad pick that they could take.
They still have Griffin on the defensive line too.
Yep.
So
Anthony Barr at UCLA
had a great year.
Yeah.
Teddy Bridgewater's going to do fine in this season. Do you go O-line then too?
You can go O-line if the receiver happens to be there, you take a receiver.
I
think you can say that about any team.
Yeah, I mean any team
those are. Imagine if. We talk all the time. If these guys were in last year's draft, these receivers, it's just ridiculous.
I mean, you would have had about 10 picks that were wide receiver in the first round if these guys were there too. I mean,
and there's still receivers that are very good, that are great,
that were taken
in this draft,
later,
but are gonna go later in this draft right now. So they can pretty much go anywhere. Offensive line definitely. It never hurts to build a wall, especially around a quarterback like Teddy B.
Right. I mean, with the Browns at 12, they just need to figure it out. The offense needs help, and Josh Gordon's going to be out for another year. And Manziel is not your answer at quarterback. It never was.
Right.
And you don't have Ben Tate, who wasn't really great in the backfield anyway, but you don't really have anyone that you're going to solidly rely on. I do think that they could stand to use either one of their current running backs, but they need help. I mean, even if you get Jordan Cameron back, you have nothing around that team. That offense, weapon-wise, is a skeleton.
Nothing.
Yeah.
No receivers.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah.
Size.
They need to do anything and everything they can to try and get. I mean, they have 2 picks in the first round.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I would be surprised if they traded up.
They could trade up. They could trade 2 for 1.
2 for 1, trade up, maybe snag Kevin White. Situation. A receiver.
Again, any team could really.
That's
use
a team that has
guys.
such a quarterback fiasco. We won't know who the quarterback is for, months.
Manziel will get out of rehab. ESPN will cover all of it, but they'll be right there as he's walking out of rehab or something stupid like that. But I mean, then it'll all of a sudden turn to is Hoyer our starter or not, and
then someone else might come
someone else might come out of the woodwork.
Would you be surprised if they were like, because Pettin hasn't said he's totally
behind Hoyer,
and he said he's definitely not behind Manziel. I mean, he's proud of his progress, but would you be surprised if? I mean, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm not saying these are opinions that I think. That's why I've been asking. Would you be surprised?
Right.
So, would you be surprised if Mariota goes, Winston goes, the Browns take a chance on Hundley
in the first round?
Yep.
I can see that with their second first-round pick. Maybe not their first pick, but their second pick. Yeah, I wouldn't see.
You got to assume that they.
I could see them taking a risk
by having, 2 picks in the first round. They can pretty much do anything they want. Essentially, they get a stud on offense, a stud on defense.
Right. They can move them. They can move both picks too. Yeah.
Keep one, move one. I mean, there's a lot of options.
Right. Then you have New Orleans, and I just said they need to do 2 things. Fix their defense, and add weapons for Breeze.
I'm going to go with fix their defense more than weapons because Colston, solid. Kenny Stills had a great year.
He's a good deep threat.
He is. He's quick, but he's
speed.
tiny. Yeah.
I mean, as long as he can break away, as long as he gets to open field, he's good.
And Jimmy Graham needs to have a better year. They need to figure out Mark Ingram's deal because he's a solid piece to that team.
At one point, he was the best statistical
running
besides DeMarco Murray,
right?
Before he broke his wrist in week 7 or something like that.
Yeah, I think it was. I think that I agree. But defense to me first because
definitely
the defense just lacks. They lack at corner too. I mean,
you have Vaccaro at safety.
He's good,
but
Keenan Lewis is okay at corner.
I mean, who do you really have at
Patrick Robinson's okay at corner
at linebacker or your defensive line that's going to, put in that work for you.
That's true.
Then we have the Dolphins. After that, I just said that they need to overhaul their secondary to a certain extent.
Yes, that is the smartest thing you said all day. Because Grimes is so old.
And Finnegan's old. Delmas is tore up his knee against the Patriots.
They have no one.
He tore up his knee against, I think it was the Patriots. It was either them or the Bills.
It was Delmas, yeah.
And he was a good piece for them too.
No one behind those guys. Yeah, I can tell you 3rd and 4th string corners in the NFL that could step up and do solid. And in Miami, they don't have that. They have 2.
So do you think they take
up Pro Bowl?
Do you think they take Collins out of Bama for that
for
pick?
Safety?
Yeah,
he's a safety.
They could.
They definitely.
They're middle of the round. It's not too shocking at that point.
Yeah, it's really not.
Secondary is acceptable.
I could definitely see that.
I mean, just because
secondary 100% has got to be the key focus, at least in the first few rounds.
They lost 6 linebackers to injury. Those guys will be fine. Their defensive line with Cameron Wake is solid for what they have.
And on offense, I mean, Lamar Miller's proven to be a good running back.
Yeah.
Tannehill's solid.
The only other thing I said would be to kind of add depth at wide receiver.
Right, because I mean Mike Wallace is getting up there in age.
Yeah,
and
his deal's running on the back end
too. Rashard Matthews had a great year.
Was it? They also had another guy who's young.
Jarvis Landry.
Yeah, he did all right for them too.
Yeah, he did pretty good at LSU. So I mean, you can get by.
I still think secondary is their
big
thing.
Key.
And then we have the 49ers, and
They are in a rebuilding.
I had two small sentences for them. One was rebuild, and the other one was solve internal disputes. Because
so many.
You can't.
Crabtree might be on his way out. I saw that article that was. I don't know why it would be that, but I saw that
the Patriots should never even get Crabtree. That shouldn't be an option.
Go after guys that are older.
That was one of our classmates put that up. But the whole thing for them is that you don't go internally to defensive line if you have guys that are still in the market like a Rex Ryan.
Exactly.
Or John Fox, like guys that you can come into a pretty big name franchise and take over. Like, you can't just have all of a sudden everyone go, you know what? I don't really want to go there because you know what? They're having some, things go,
issues.
Happen on the inside.
I loved Harbaugh, but one thing that I don't think Harbaugh did.
And one of the things that he said was that the organization gave up on him before he decided to leave.
I think he's a great coach. I love the guy. Great intensity.
I think he'll do great things for Michigan.
He will. And I can't even say one negative thing about him other than this. And we're not in the locker room, so we don't know.
Right.
But I think, and I don't think he's mature enough to have this privilege, but I still think it's, if you want to win, you have to. Kaepernick needs to have total control of the offense. Total control, and he didn't. He absolutely did not.
Yeah.
When Harbaugh was there. But I think that in order to...
But they're going to have a lot of problems offensively because Gore's old, Crabtree's not good.
No.
Johnson, who they traded Buffalo for, is not what he used to be. Bolden's up there in age as good as he is. They can't rely on him. They didn't use Vernon Davis at all this year. Which is horrible for them.
That's what I'm saying. You got to let Kaepernick run the offense his way.
Give Hyde a chance.
Give Hyde a chance.
Give the ball back to Davis.
When Hyde did play, he played solid. Yeah. So.
I mean, not that Gore's bad. It's just he's older. And he's been a running back for over 10 years, which is rare to do.
He can't get the 30 carries that he used to be able to get in a game and produce.
Right. And then for the Texans, I had two things again. I had QB, and then I had secondary. Because their front seven on defense is great.
Mm-hmm.
They have almost no one behind it except for Manning at safety.
Yeah,
but I mean,
Kareem Jackson's pretty good. At corner,
but like these
other safety position's solid too.
These guys are good. They didn't. I mean, there's no real depth behind them, and they didn't produce.
Jonathan Joseph's up there.
Yeah, and they didn't produce enough to make that defense. Make that defense top 10. In a lot of tops. It very well could be. It's almost there. I think their secondary is what's holding them back. And I think quarterback is also a big problem for them, too, because they had zero depth. I mean, they had Tom Savage out of Pitt that they got in, like, the third round last year.
He's actually not bad. It's just
he got hurt. Then you had Ryan Mallett got hurt.
I was going to say, what did they give Mallett? What was that deal? Do you remember what that deal was?
I don't think it was a big deal, though.
Was it 3? I'm thinking about years. I think
it was
3 years?
2-3 years, something like that.
So is he the guaranteed starter?
No.
Such a sloppy...
That'd be a sloppy pick.
There's no more quarterbacks, though. You're not going to take a chance on anyone else. There's no more quarterbacks that you can take. How many more young quarterbacks can you bring in that aren't going to do anything?
Right, and I think that it was kind of surprising on my end because you never expect Foster to play an entire year.
No.
He plays like 3 games and goes down for 6, and then comes back for another 3, goes down for another couple games, and then gets shut down for the season or something like that. Great talent, but this was the first year he was consistently great for that team. But Andre Johnson's old. You have DeAndre Hopkins, who's a great number 1 target.
Oh yeah,
when Johnson goes, amazing. But you have all these things that this team could be doing. They could be a lot better than they are number wise.
Oh, without a doubt.
But I think that just a couple things are holding them back. Quarterback is the big thing, but secondary as well. Kind of picking up the pace a little bit. We have San Diego. I just said improved defense.
Improved secondary because all they have at corner is Sharice Wright and Jason Verrett.
Right. Because Eric Weddle's at safety, and he's pretty good too.
Flowers is gone.
They could try and re-sign him.
He's getting up there in age, and he's going to want money.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, it's
what do you do in a situation like that? Do you pay the vet, or do you go in a different direction and go young?
They could draft someone at corner.
Corners,
but then even then, I still think you could try and re-sign Flowers because I don't think they have too many people that are going to try and re-sign this year. I mean, Hardwick retired, and that was their center.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a concern for them.
That's a big loss. That's going to hurt.
Then with the Chiefs, it was just you can't rely on Jamal Charles, Niall Davis, and Travis Cleese to be your offensive weapons. You need a wide receiver. Like, if they take, like, Green Beckham or Funchess or Jaleel Strong or just someone to throw the ball to. I mean, it's just ridiculous how they haven't had a receiver with a touchdown in over a year.
Right.
I mean, that's unheard of.
I mean, Junior Hemingway,
especially nowadays,
is young. One of their receivers, Junior Hemingway, he's all right.
But they only throw to Bo.
Derrick Rogers is more of like a special team, and they only throw to Bo. You're right. Yeah. Travis Kelce can't do everything. At tight end, so.
You need to let him develop. He's still young.
Yeah.
Then we have Buffalo, and I said they need to just sort out their offensive problems because their defense will be fire in the next year or two. That defense is going to be top 3. Like, that defense is going to be dirty. Yeah,
scary.
Once they re-sign Jerry Hughes, I mean
one of the best.
It makes me scared as a Patriots fan
what that
defense can do, and especially with Brady leaving in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. Like, that is going to be filthy.
Without a doubt.
But I do think that they need to add depth at wide receiver. You can't just rely on Sammy Watkins. That was proven this year.
Well,
E.J. Manuel's a bit of a question
mark, but
it is a little bit of a hit or miss.
Right.
They don't have Kyle Orton to rescue them, and
the running back position is
Spiller and Jackson are so hurt every year. Dixon clearly couldn't fit in for
and
them.
Bryce
after
Brown
that.
doesn't fit in.
Yeah, so they need to refix.
Would you be surprised if they went running back
at first? No.
Could Melvin Gordon go here?
Yeah, Melvin Gordon. Actually, the Bills don't have their first round pick because it's
they traded
Browns.
with the Browns.
Yeah,
you're right. So
yeah,
they're going
that's why I have them all the way down there. So I think second round, their first pick must be running back or wide receiver.
Their pick is with the Browns. Yep. Yeah.
Then we have the Eagles, and my real big question mark for them was, is Foles their franchise quarterback? Is that what they're really going to go for? Because we were even talking about potentially they could move Foles and still have Sanchez there. Because Sanchez, for what it's worth, he's not old.
No.
He's still fairly young. So I think that...
How many teams are going
to want Sanchez? How many teams could use someone young like
someone
Nick
might
Foles?
take him and say, look, you're the backup,
But even then, you have a team that maybe like Cleveland who needs a quarterback. Maybe they're not going to draft one. Maybe instead of drafting Hundley, they go out and trade for
a vet.
Like Nick Foles.
Never.
And Foles is probably one of your best options at quarterback if you were going to try and move around. And I would put him above Sam Bradford. Even.
Oh yeah.
But I think even then, I mean, you need a better year out of LaShawn McCoy. He cannot have a year like he did last year.
He didn't score
until week 8.
His rushing totals were okay, but he
didn't
score.
But what's the point of running for 150 yards if you don't put it in the end zone?
Exactly.
I mean that's kind of difficult. Jordan Matthews is good. They need to need to re-sign Macklin, but they're
with
solid.
Those two on the outside. Those good receivers. So
yeah. And now we go on to the Steelers, and I said defense and O-line are must fixes.
Definitely.
I think you address. I think they go O-line first. I think they take like a guy like La'el Collins, or something like that.
Yeah.
Because Roethlisberger needs the protection, they're getting zero help from anyone.
Killed on that line. And the receivers are set there. Running back obviously set. So
yeah, you have Le'Veon Bell. You have Antonio Brown.
Right.
You have Martavis Bryant. I mean that's set.
Yeah.
And then for Detroit, the next pick, I said fix O-line and decide whether you're going to do Sue or Fairley, and then go from there.
Maybe both if you. I mean, there's absolutely
you'd have to really get.
There's no way you can get both without reconstructing a lot of stuff.
Not even just that. I think Stafford would have to take a pay cut, obviously.
Pay cut. Not even like a little one.
It would be a big pay cut. But you have to get both Sue and Fairley to agree to take a big pay cut for them as well, potentially, because you'd want to win over that.
That's another defense that really could be really good if they just work on the secondary.
That defensive line is top 3 every year.
Yep.
They can't follow through behind it, though. So I think that's a bit of a problem for them as well. I had the Cardinals, and I'm going to lump in Carolina with this as well. Just add offensive weapons. Both defenses can work. Both defenses are fairly strong for what they're worth. Cardinals obviously better than the Panthers.
Arizona's got to figure out where they're going with the direction.
They have Larry Fitz back. They have John Brown, who's going to come into his own. But who else do you have around him?
Andre Ellington should return from injury pretty nicely.
And he said that he was going to bulk up and try and be more of a power back as well, which would be really helpful.
What about Palmer? Like, can he stay healthy for them?
I think that they might get. I think they might get like a Grayson in like the third round or second round because they want that secure backup.
Right.
But yeah, I think Palmer could be what they want for them again this year. I mean, he showed that he definitely had it last year consistently week in and week out until he was hurt. That's why they gave him that big extension. And then with the Ravens, I said you either need to sign Forsett or look at the draft because there's not that strong of a field for running backs. And then I said secondary because Elam's good, Jimmy Smith's good. Outside of that, who do you have really?
Nobody.
No one. So you really need to work on that secondary, and then that defense is going to be dirty again.
Too,
Slightly older, but good for a couple years. And then for the Cowboys, I said you need to decide fast between Dez or DeMarco, and then make sure you re-sign Doug Free, and then look to your defense.
Yeah. Yep. Totally agree.
I mean, it's just a very simple thing.
Try to figure out what you're going to direction. What are your best options? We had the debate last week on the show.
So I think that they just once they figured that Dez or whether they want Dez or DeMarco.
That's the most important part of
that is their biggest part of the offseason. Yeah. I mean, that is pretty much their offseason at this point. And then for Denver, I just said, they need to figure out if Peyton's coming back ASAP or not. Like pressure him into.
I think if he doesn't, they are gonna just stay with Brock Osweiler.
They need to build around him at that point. But I said, Peyton is a huge question mark. They need to get their offense in order. Re-sign Demaryius. If Peyton doesn't come back, maybe you do re-sign Julius Thomas.
That's true.
You keep C.J. Henderson as your starter because he tore it up last year.
Right.
And then the other part would be look at your defense because that defense should be a lot better than it is. Their inside linebacker that was really good, the other Brandon Marshall, he's a free agent this year, not restricted, so any team can go after him and get him. And maybe a team who needs defensive depth.
That's true.
Might go out and get him. And one of my friends was actually telling me that if the Patriots do let Gerard Mayo go, maybe you get Marshall because he did put up some numbers and he wouldn't cost nearly as much.
Cost a lot of money at all, really.
And it was hard to argue against it because if you have looked at sportsrants.com or anything, I wrote a big piece for the Patriots and I did say that they might look into. They should at least look into Gerard Mayo going because, and we'll talk about that in a second, because he's too much money for not playing a full season since 2012.
Exactly.
But we're going to sidetrack a little bit, or leave that on the back burner for a second, because we have Indianapolis and the Colts. I said that they need to do two things. Add depth at wide receiver because Moncrief's there, Hilton's there, but Wayne's old.
Getting old, yep.
But you do have Fleener and Allen at tight end. You're set. Bradshaw will come back. He's good for now. You have Boom
Heron. Yeah.
But their defensive front seven specifically.
Secondary too a little bit because all you have is Vontae Davis really, and then Toller's
and Mike Adams.
Old. Mike Adams too. It's safety,
but I mean, DeQuell Jackson is not the linebacker he was at Cleveland.
No.
And
Corey Redding's good.
You have Bjorn Werner, who's good, and Corey Redding.
Yeah.
But in Arthur Jones, but you lack depth at those positions because a couple of those guys go down and you have no one behind them.
Yeah.
I mean, they let Francois go, but that was probably for the best. And then we have Green Bay, and I just said they need to work on that D line. I mean, you have AJ Hawk.
Yeah, they can.
They have Clay
can
Matthews.
Fix the defense has pieces that could be really good.
Yeah.
I always say I don't think their defense is bad. I just think that they're missing a few pieces to make it, pretty good again.
Right. Raji's getting old. I mean, you don't have too much depth there anyway. I mean, that's something that they could really look into adding on. And then we have Seattle. I said that their biggest problem would be breaking the salary cap.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, I've been a huge vocal person about this. I've been very adamant about it. Is that they could break salary cap so hard and make it look like a joke because salary cap's going up by $10 million next year, but they look to blow that entirely out of the water. Yeah. They gave Earl Thomas a big extension last year, Sherman a big extension. They paid Cam. They're paying Lynch, and they might sign him to an extension again. And then you're looking at making Russell Wilson the biggest the highest paid quarterback in the league, and then you want depth at wide receiver. It just doesn't make sense to me. Like, if that team wants to get better, if they want to win another Super Bowl in the next 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, if they want to stay on top or stay close to the top, they need wide receivers, and they don't have that right now.
Yeah.
Doug Baldwin had one catch, and it was off of pick, off of a referee. That's not anything.
Yeah.
Like, that's not talent. You didn't burn Revis. Like,
no.
That was nothing. And then, Curse had one great catch, but then was no name. You had Chris Matthews take over that game.
Take over the game, really, yeah.
And Luke Wilson was his big target going into that, and he did nothing. And the Patriots were pretty bad at covering, tight ends going into that, and Jamie Collins shut him down. So that was interesting. And I said that they need to add wide receivers, but they also need to utilize Chris Matthews because he's a talent.
Yeah, I mean,
6'4" and can run down the field like no one. Yeah,
in any other stage, I mean, that's the one to do it in. So.
Right. And then you also have the Patriots, and I said that they could go O-line or D-line in the draft, but they need to do two things: re-sign Revis and then re-sign McCourty.
Yeah, that's what we said.
That is their entire. That should be their entire focus.
And I think that should be done before the draft.
Well before
it's
the draft.
It's kind of like, get your homework done before you're on vacation.
Exactly. I'm going to do all my homework before I go on break on Friday. Like,
get it all done, and then it's just enjoy the rest.
Right, like when you go home, are you going to be honestly doing homework down in Florida?
No, absolutely not.
No,
what you do
watching
is this.
Golf and, just on the beach.
Exactly.
Probably.
So what you do is this. Sign those two.
Yep.
Focus on the draft now instead of panicking. How are we going to do this?
How are we going to pay both?
They need to get them.
Right.
That's a must.
I even think that one of them could be franchise tagged.
I wouldn't be surprised.
And then you pay the other one, and then you draft, and then you pay the other one next year.
Without a doubt, I would not be surprised at all.
See, look at this. Listen to me and Benelli.
That's right.
So thank you guys for listening. We're 2 men down for this episode before break, but we're finally doing one on a Tuesday. Look at that.
Regular time.
Oh, man. The first time the entire semester.
Regular time, regular place. We will always be on this time from now on.
Everything's been done, so, barring another blizzard or some ridiculous, weather event that closes down schools, we will be here Tuesdays from 2:30 to 4.
2:30 to 4 every week now. Except for next week.
Because we're on spring break. So this will be our last one until after. So 2 weeks is when we're coming back.
When we get back, there'll be plenty to talk about in a 2-week span.
Right, right. Thank you guys for listening. If you're listening to Newbury College Radio or watching, if you're watching this on YouTube, we'll be back in 2 weeks, like we said. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at the NFL Korner, Korner with a K, 3. No spaces, to see what we think of NFL stories and issues in 140 characters or less. And feel free to ask us any NFL-related questions if you want. Our personal Twitters are on that account as well. Feel free to talk to us. Thanks again for listening and watching. You are listening to the NFL Korner here on Newbury College Radio, the sound of Nighthawk Nation. Peace, guys. Look at that.
Killed it.
Fantastic.
Great show, buddy.